Here we are with a bonus round of the 70s versus the 90s. And in this round, we have Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye versus the Coen brothers' The Big Lebowski. And what this one is, this was a very hard one too, because I love both of these movies. They're both very fun movies, and they're both in a style of Raymond Chandler, that LA noir, real quirky shit going on and all that shit. And so, I mean, let's just go ahead and look at where the fuck these movies were at in these directors' career, because these are both very great directors. Robert Altman specifically was America's answer to Jean-Luc Godard in the 70s. His output of work in the 70s is, in my opinion, on par with that of Godard's output in the 60s, and in a way that he had this kind of fuck you mentality, very in your face, let's break down the cinema, but also somebody that had a real respect for the craft, even more so than Godard, because, for as much as Godard, talked about the respect of the cinema, he really didn't respect it that much. It was just, it's like all fucking, how many rules can we break? How much shit can we throw at the wall and see if it sticks? Altman, on the other hand, had a different approach that was more realistic. I wouldn't say avant-garde in a way, but he would take a script and just kind of use it as a blueprint and, see what actors he was working with and try to create, a more realistic vision of this world, but at the same time, making you realize you're watching a fucking movie. And nothing epitomizes that more than The Long Goodbye. It's kind of a trope that he started doing in MASH and carried over into this one. And, he had two stipulations that got him to do this film. The fact that they wanted Elliot Gould for Philip Marlowe, which is a character that has played most famously by Humphrey Bogart in The Big Sleep. And the screenwriter for that film, Lee Brackett, also wrote the script for The Long Goodbye. And the thing about it is, Dick Powell also played him, and Robert Montgomery, and even Robert Mitchum in the late 70s did a bunch of trash, rehashes of The Big Sleep and Farewell My Lovely, but Elliot Gould is probably the closest anybody got to topping what Bogart did in The Big Sleep, because the thing about the 70s had this thing where they, were basically tearing down everything about the old Hollywood system, and that includes every fucking trope that they had in their films. And one of the biggest and most popular ones was the private detective film noir, and this is, in a way, it's more LA than anything else. It perfectly captures the atmosphere of LA at the time that this film was made. There's a lot of quirky shit in it. Elliot Gould never stops being quippy. He probably throws out more quips than he lights cigarettes, and he chain smokes quite a few cigarettes. I've shown this movie to several friends, and all of the smokers cannot make it through this movie without smoking a fucking cigarette. So maybe there's some water to that fucking, theory that it's all, subliminal or whatever the fuck, but I don't think that was Altman's intent, because if you see every old Hollywood movie, they're always smoking a cigarette, and you never really, there's very few times that you see Elliot Gould without a cigarette in his mouth or he's lighting a match, and some of the most inventive ways to light a match. It's just also naturalistic. And in a way, he's kind of the square that's in this fucking, hippied out LA, very swinging, all fucking just all kinds of fucked up. And he's, in a way, not really there to judge, but, kind of sift through all the fucking bullshit, and so it's just the way he navigates it and the way that Altman constructs it, and the other stipulation is that ending. It has Philip Marlowe shoots his friend Terry Lennox. Spoiler alert, be sure to watch these movies before you see these videos and shit. But the fact that ending is what makes this movie so fucking great, because his friend kind of fucks him over, but the biggest reason why he kills his best friend is because his best friend ran over his fucking cat. So this is way before John Wick shit. That's never fully addressed in the film, but the last thing, his friend calls him a loser. It's yeah, I even lost my cat. So it's dude probably didn't even know he hit the motherfucker. He just that's how much of an asshole Terry Lennox was. But everybody in this movie is fucking great. Sterling Hayden gets one last swan song, after being a snitch ass bitch. and for Huac and all that shit. And then you got fucking Nina Van Pallant is a really great femme fatale. Mark Rydell is Marty Augustine. The fucking one of the most ruthless scenes I've ever seen when he breaks that Coke bottle over that girl's face. That is just some of the. I've never really seen something so intense and shocking. It's even back to Straw Dogs. It's a lot more shocking, the shit that happens in this movie, because like Altman had this way of being edgy and fucking alternative, I guess you can fucking call it, and making it seem as naturalistic as hell. Because then we look at moving forward, something like the Coen brothers. It's not a literal like Raymond Chandler adaptation, but you can clearly see the Raymond Chandler influence in this story. Another LA noir, and instead of the early 70s, it's the early 90s, even though the movie was made in the late 90s. So it's not, thing about the Coen brothers, they really weren't good at making films that capture a contemporary time that they were making the film. Most of their films take place in a fucking certain place and time, or if it's supposed to be like contemporary, it's in their own little fucking world. Altman, on the other hand, creates realistic fiction, so to speak. Now I'm just making up words, but more to the point of the Coen brothers, we look at The Big Lebowski. This is more of a stoner film than The Long Goodbye. The Long Goodbye is not necessarily a stoner film, although it does feel like a stoner film. And the thing about it is, there are great performances. Some of the best. John Goodman is just the hands down the best one in this film. Like, when he's on the screen, he steals every fucking scene. He's got some of the best fucking lines. Highly quotable film too. Just endless fucking quotes and shit. And then I have a sneaking suspicion they just paid Jeff Bridges and weed and just said, "Do you, dog?" Because you can tell that motherfucker is like, really fucking stoned or just really good at playing somebody being stoned. Irregardless, dude had smoked weed before or after or during all fucking three of that fucking film, because you really feel that shit. The scene where he's dealing with the fucking Lebowski dude, he's trying to do adult shit and he's high as fuck. So there's little moments, there's little like nuances, but that's most of what the Coen brothers is. And at this point they had become, so much of a parody of themselves. It's like a lot of directors of that time period, they'd burn out after like 3 or 4 films and then just start just putting out some of those random shit. And sometimes it would be genius. Like, there's so many great moments. Sam Elliott kind of sums it up at the end. It had me laughing to beat the bin parts anyways, because like where The Long Goodbye is just non-stop fucking quips, it's funny shit, quirky characters, like fucking nude yoga going on across the street. There's so much other, like, you got the whole feminist shit in The Big Lebowski. Julianne Moore is fucking phenomenal, and David Thewlis, is a scene in one of the scenes is Knox Harrington. Just so there's all these moments are so random and they don't really do much to progress the plot in the way that The Long Goodbye did. Either way, like, everything gets resolved in The Long Goodbye, whereas in like The Big Lebowski, it just doesn't gel well. As far as that, it starts out so fucking strong and then kind of peters off in the end, and it's just like, well, what the fuck, I didn't like seeing Donnie go either. I'm like, it serves absolutely no fucking purpose. The whole plot of the chick trying to get pregnant and using his sperm, as far as like sperm count goes or whatever the fuck, I don't know what the hell you can test, but would this like fucking rich feminist chick really be trying to get the sperm of this fucking burnout stoner in LA? I don't know. And I know it's supposed to be a comedy. We're digging down deep, but The Long Goodbye at the end of the day is a comedy. Altman at the end of the day mostly just made comedies. Some of them were just more serious than others. In the cinema, you can't really take shit too seriously, but as an artist, you have to believe in it, and I think, all parties involved, both films, everybody believed in their own bullshit. And, the thing about it is I personally think The Big Lebowski can hold up to The Long Goodbye, but I do not think that it can surpass The Long Goodbye. So I got to give it to The Long Goodbye on this one. So for all of y'all counting out there, that's fucking 12, 8, 70s, 90s are fucking getting smoked. Now, mind you, this was a hard one. And I've had a few of these hard ones, and there's going to be even more of these hard ones. And some of them are going to be fucking easy as shit. It's like the 90s are getting smoked right now, but, you know, the thing about the 90s is they can surprise you. But the thing about it is, and this is the important thing, and I covered this in Straw Dogs versus Cape Fear, and the Coen brothers definitely put this on display in The Big Lebowski. A lot of the directors of the 90s were trying to fucking reinvent old Hollywood tropes with the new Hollywood edginess. Because whereas in The Long Goodbye, they're breaking that shit down. You know, and Altman immediately lets you know that this is a fucking movie. This is a fucking farce at home. Hooray for Hollywood. You know, that kind of shit. You know, and he's dancing at the end. You know, there's a reference to The Third Man at the end. But it's done so cold that, like, unless you are really a fan of The Third Man, you're not going to fucking get it. Whereas, like, most of the references in The Big Lebowski or any other fucking, like, you know, film bro movies of the fucking 90s, you know, they're so heavy-handed. But also, Altman thumbs his nose at the fucking Third Man when he's all dancing. And, you know, it's just like, they're so in love with the cinema that they don't take time to actually make a real fucking story. Whereas, like, you got this weird Busby Berkeley musical number for a fucking hallucination scene when they slip him a Mickey and shit. And it's like, for it's like a guy that's done that many drugs, he probably wouldn't be tripping that hard. There's just so much shit that sure it looks cool or it's funny, but it just does nothing to service the plot. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, even if we were judging like laughs per minute, they'd honestly probably be even. You know, I didn't really gauge it on that. I gauged it on what told the best story because, you know, these movies could go either way, comedy or drama. You know, Big Lebowski may be more of a comedy than The Long Goodbye or whatever the fuck shit you want to measure with that. But at the end of the day, The Long Goodbye is the better movie. Elliot Gould is the fucking man in it, as we're like John Goodman. Without John Goodman, this movie may not be that fucking good, you know, but it was, like I said, this was a hard one because there's brilliant acting and brilliant writing in both movies, but, you know, who knows? This is a bonus round. I'm gonna if I don't have another bonus round come up, the next one will be Deliverance versus The River Wild. So there's another, like I said, the 90s always got a chance to win, you know, and they came pretty close. But, you know, most motherfuckers can't stack up to Altman. Now, if motherfuckers don't think, I understand the Coen brothers, I think I do, but I'd argue most of you motherfuckers don't understand Altman. So that's why he wins. Fucking Altman was the man, the American Godard, and he wasn't even fucking trying. That's how bad he hated the cinema. He hated the movies that came out of the cinema, but appreciated the craft. And that's what a lot of motherfuckers don't really understand. So 12-8, 70s. 70s may be the greatest decade of all time for filmmaking, at least.